Hello, welcome to Hope for Anxiety and OCD, episode 7. For today's episode, I got to interview one of my friends in the counseling profession, Anika Mullen. It's kind of like Monica, but without the M, is what she told me when I first met her. And Anika was so sweet, guys, because when we went to record this show, we had been talking and got through almost the entire interview. We were towards the end, and I realized nothing got recorded. I was absolutely mortified, but I say all this to let you know that I'm completely human. And Anika was so gracious, and she said, Carrie, it's okay. Just hit record. Let's do it again. And so we got a little bit of practice before our actual recording, and I think it turned out really well. So today on the show, we are talking about PCIT, which stands for Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. This is a therapy that Anika is specialized in and has received training in. She's going to talk about the origins of this therapy as well as its use for children who have tantrums or behavioral issues. And then we're also going to get into how can this help parents support their child who has anxiety. So let's dive right into this interview with a licensed professional counselor, Anika Mullen. So Anika, you and I have known each other for a few years, but I don't know that I've ever heard the story about how you decided to become a therapist.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet. So in college, I volunteered with an organization that helped human trafficking survivors. And I decided that if I wanted to work with trauma survivors in the future, I wanted to get the education, do the work I needed to provide the best treatment we have to offer to address therapy. And so I decided to get a graduate degree in clinical mental health counseling. And then when I was in clinical mental health counseling, I attended a training call with an organization in California that works with sex trafficking survivors. And in that call, they were talking about how some of the sex trafficking survivors that they were working with and helping, they got EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. That type of therapy, if they had PTSD before therapy, after going through the EMDR therapy process, afterwards, they no longer met criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. And I found that just absolutely incredible. That
incredible.
For that level of repeated trauma, we have something that is helpful. And so that really inspired me to get training in EMDR after I graduated and actually prompted me to get to know you because EMDR is one of your areas of expertise.
Right. And now you've taken a little bit of a shift. You were working with children of a variety of ages and some that had experienced trauma, some that had anxiety, some that had behavior problems. And now you've shifted into your own practice of providing PCIT. So what ages is PCIT indicated for?
PCIT has been thoroughly researched as an effective treatment for ages 2.5 through 7. And so 6-year-olds all the way up to age 7. There are new research now coming out about PCIT for toddler ages, so like 15 to 24 months, who may be struggling with attachment or regulation and development and even language skills are showing that PCIT, the toddler adaptation, is effective for that age. There's also some research being done about an older child adaptation. We don't currently have randomized controlled trials for older children yet.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the background of PCIT and how it got started?
Absolutely. So Dr. Sheila Iberg started developing it in the 1970s. And she was at that time drawing on different types of therapy that had positives, and she really wanted to take the powerful positive aspects of these different types of therapy and combine them into one even more effective therapy. And so she combined attachment theory and play therapy, which really has a calming effect on children and can be very therapeutic and healing, with behavior therapy, which can really help turn around challenging behaviors and increase the behaviors that we want to see. And so drawing on aspects of play therapy and behavior therapy, she also drew on the work of Constance Hempf, who is a psychologist that developed a type of therapy that instead of the therapist doing the work, what the therapist did was coach the parent in being the therapeutic agent of change. And so the PCIT that she developed, she decided to draw on attachment and play therapy as well as behavior therapy to create a combination that really draws on the best of both. Also was drawing on the research of Diana Baumrind, who was looking at different styles of parenting and what styles tend to have the best outcomes. And so what was identified in that research was authoritative parenting, which is not authoritarian, but authoritative parenting has a combination of warmth and nurturing, as well as clear communication and firm, effective limit setting. And so by drawing on behavior therapy that has a lot to do with behavior change and limits and seeing behaviors we want, while also drawing on play therapy, she was able to create a system of therapy that increases the nurturing and the connection and the warmth, while also increasing predictable, calm limit setting. And that combination is really, especially for children that might have developmental challenges or ADHD or histories of trauma or just certain personalities that can be more challenging to parent. The authoritative style, when parents can be equipped with those skills, it can really just reduce stress for everyone and increase positive interactions and really help promote healthy emotional regulation and development.
So it sounds like she really combined the best of three different worlds almost.
She did. In drawing on the work of Constance Hempf, she was able to teach parents the skills in a way that instead of just lectures, she would join the parents with an earpiece in their ear, watching through a video camera or a one-way mirror, and coach them live. So it wasn't giving parents all this knowledge and homework and sending it home and saying, here you go, this is what you should do. It was like, I'm here with you. I'm coaching you every step of the way. You can get these skills. We're going to practice this one. All right, let's work on this one today. And then a lot of encouragement and praise until the parents have the confidence that they have the skills to manage the more challenging elements of parenting.
Because how many times have you or I been taught something with someone else and we think, oh, I got this, I'm good. And then we leave that environment and go to do it on our own. And we go, oh no, what was it they said right there?
And just that close working relationship where I'm really encouraging the parents and prompting them with little reminders when needed on the skills and celebrating their successes. It helps them turn around with that same optimism and warmth then to help their child. It's very supportive on the therapist to parent side as well as the parent to child side. That warmth is really established as the first part of therapy, the play therapy, warm, nurturing aspect. And that's something parents receive from me as well. And then in the second part of therapy is where I really equip parents with the skills to address the more challenging behaviors if that's something that their child is experiencing.
There are several different types of therapies for children, as you just named. And so some are less directive than others. For example, non-directive play therapy, the child will come into a room full of toys with the play therapist, and the play therapist may reflect what the child is interacting with in relationship to them and the toys, whereas PCIT is a lot more of a structured approach.
So it is structured in that there are different stages of therapy. And in the first stage of therapy, we actually teach parents professional play therapy skills. And so we teach them reflection and we teach them other play therapy skills. And what that does is it really sets the foundation needed when we get to the limit setting stage that is more structured, like behavior therapy is more structured.
Right. I know that you're also a parent yourself. And so could you tell us a little bit about how learning about this therapy impacted you as a parent?
So it really, having seen how transformative those parent play therapy sessions are with kids, it made me want to offer my child the same thing. I see it building kids' confidence, building kids' social skills, and just increasing the likelihood that the child wants to please the parent and cooperate and be a team. And so just seeing the positive impact that 5 minutes a day of play therapy with their kid had on so many kids' lives, I was like, I want my kid to have that too. And so what we call special time is part of our everyday life now. And it's just something that my kid can count on. It tends to be calming and just a really therapeutic time to connect. I've also found it's just really built my confidence in how to address like non-compliant behavior. Often for a lot of families, getting out the door in the morning, getting to the school bus on time is a highly stressful time. And it can easily lead to what I call the escalation cycle, where one person raises their voice, the kid doesn't comply and gets irritated and reactive, and then it kind of escalates more and more as the bus is coming and we're still not ready to get out the door. PCIT has really equipped me with the skills to increase cooperation in a positive way and also to firmly set limits when they need to be set, because limits actually help kids feel safe. They actually reduce anxiety, and sometimes kids listening to limits can save their lives. So limits are a very important part of parenting, and PCIT really helps parents in tangible ways achieve that balance of warmth and nurturing and clear, calm limit setting.
I know you work with parents who, by the time they get to you, they may feel they're at the end of their rope. They may feel so overwhelmed by their child's emotional outbursts or by their avoidance of behaviors because they're angry. They won't sleep in their own room, for example. Mm-hmm. And parents may say, I don't understand what happened because I did the same things with my second child that I did with my first child, and it's just not working. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I work with a lot of parents who've been getting a lot of mixed advice from a lot of different people. It may be a parent or a grandparent or a religious leader or a friend, or everybody's just giving them conflicting advice about how to respond to a child's behavior. And I find it really helpful that I have this ability to draw on over 40 years of research of professionals who've worked with really challenging children about what really helps turn dynamics around and replace that escalation cycle with respect and cooperation and what we call in PCIT minding and listening. So following directions and heeding the rules. And having these tools, I can encourage parents like, yes, I hear that this other approach hasn't worked, but I've seen PCIT work for a lot of families. Let's just give it a try. And I really see my role as encouraging those parents and being new wind in their sails and giving them tools that they haven't had before or haven't applied in this way.
So you and I had a conversation early in 2020 about online therapy and the benefits of it and how to really encourage people to engage in online therapy because so many people have been hesitant. And then we had a pandemic and all of a sudden, pretty much all therapists were online. And we've really seen the way that people are receiving services be transformed in the midst, which I think is a good thing that's coming out of a very hard situation in our country and world. Mm-hmm. And you made a decision actually to go be an online therapist before the pandemic. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that decision?
So one of the things I love about PCIT is it helps catch things early on before they become more ingrained habits and patterns of behavior. So turning around aggressive behavior with PCIT in a preschooler or early elementary age child, it's 12 to 20 weeks. So 3 to 4 or 5 months at the most. And research shows that the impact of PCIT, even 6 years later, is still there. So since it's such a powerful intervention, I wanted to find a way that would make it more accessible to more families. So PCIT offices historically needed those 2-room spaces. They often were in a city or in a university setting. So people farther away from cities and universities didn't have access to it. And now more therapists are getting trained in it. But I recently became licensed in Nevada and in Alaska because Nevada only had one PCIT therapist in the whole state, and Alaska had no PCIT therapists.
Wow.
And so by going online and by being telehealth, I was offering an equally effective treatment, but that was just way more accessible. You didn't have to fight traffic to get there. You didn't have to be close to a PCIT therapist. It just helps make it easier to fit into families' lives, and at times less costly too, because I'm not fronting the cost of having a double office as well.
Right. One of the things that's great about utilizing PCIT online is that the parents are able to practice these skills with their children in their own home. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And they're finding that the behavior changes. It's easier. So instead of a child coming to an office and learning these new ways to interact and the parent applying the skills in the office, we're coaching families in real life settings at home. And so it's easier for those new skills and new behavior patterns to stick because they're in the environment that they're part of every day.
Right. I know you told me that PCIT also has an adaptation specifically for anxiety. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sometimes kids with anxiety also have externalizing behaviors. We call it outbursts and defiance when given a command because they're anxious about whatever the situation is. But there's also kids who are just anxious, but are actually pretty compliant and eager to please. And so with kids that were both anxious and had the defiant behaviors, the therapists and researchers were finding that PCIT was very calming and it helped reduce their anxiety. And so then they did a adaptation of PCIT, which we call PCIT Calm. And this adaptation is focused specifically on kids that are experiencing anxiety, but don't necessarily have behavior problems. And so it really, again, uses the same approach of having the parent be the agent of change, the parent being the one doing the play therapy with the therapist coaching in their ear and supporting them along the way. It teaches parents ways to increase the child's sense of calm and security, and then also how to help the child when the child is encountering situations that are ones the child is afraid of. For example, if a child is afraid to go to a new place or talk to new people, or is afraid to go to sleep in their own bed, or afraid to sleep without all the lights on, it teaches very simple steps parents can take to help support the brave behaviors. Oftentimes, kids will seek out parents for a lot of reassurance and nurturing when they're anxious. And parents are in a tough spot because you want to help a distressed child. You're kind of between a rock and a hard place. Like, you don't want to encourage avoiding the thing that's safe and that it's okay for them to practice being brave with. But if your child's in distress, our natural urge is to want to support them and help them through that. And so unfortunately what happens is with anxious children, they'll seek reassurance and get that nurturing that helps them calm down in the moment. But the next time they're anxious, their habit's going to be, I'm going to need more reassurance. So it kind of fuels the cycle of avoiding and getting reassurance instead. But with PCIT, we train parents how to have a lot of that nurturing and that warmth during the play therapy, and then calm strategic ways to increase brave behaviors when the child's facing something that's safe but that they're afraid of.
I love that because so many parents who have anxious children also struggle with anxiety themselves. And this model, it seems, helps build their confidence as a parent in being able to help their child with anxiety, which I imagine may in turn help them with their own anxiety some too.
I find parents want to do the best by their kids. So when they know clearly this is what I can do and it's going to help my child learn to be brave even when feeling some levels of stress, it helps the parents be brave when they're feeling the stress of their own child being anxious. And so I find my role is supporting the parents in being brave with these new parenting techniques and steps. And then the parents are able to turn around and provide that similar support to their child.
Great. So maybe there's someone listening today who is feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, I don't know if I could take in all this new information and really learn it. It sounds kind of hard. What would you say to them?
I would say that parents that reach out are often under a lot of stress already. And it's like, how can I do one more thing? Life's already stressful enough to juggle. Mm-hmm. And what I'd say is that the process is designed in a really step-by-step manner. I'm not going to teach you things and then just send you home to do it all on your own and figure it out on your own. I'm not going to be upset if you've had a hard week and it's been hard to use the skills. The beauty about this PCIT is that I get to be there with you in your home via the video camera with an earpiece in your ear, like a Bluetooth earpiece, or even a headphone. And I get to support and encourage you as you're practicing these skills. I get to praise your little successes. I get to join in the process with you and really be a supportive, safe place for you to develop these therapy skills that are going to help your child so much. And it's not all at once. There's 2 stages to the therapy. Usually there's like a first meeting where I get to know you. I get to hear about your concerns, the struggles that your child's been having. And then the next one, I get to observe the child and in different kinds of settings and interactions. And after that, I meet with just the parent. I teach them some of the skills that we're going to be practicing in the first stage. We role play them. We answer questions about them. And then to learn them, I join you in practicing them. And so I'm, again, in your home, your child being your normal child self in your home.
Right.
And I get to coach you in the moment how to apply the skills. And then when we get to the second stage of therapy, after that play therapy foundation's been laid, that's so critical. They've actually done research where they've tried to do the predictable limit setting part of treatment first and then do the play therapy afterwards. And it's not as effective. The play therapy, that nurturing warmth is an essential foundation for addressing the challenging behaviors. And so when we get to the second part of therapy, we don't even move on until the first skills come easily. So you don't even have to think about the first set of skills so much when you get to the second part. Once they're fluid and come easily, we move to the second part. And again, I'm right there with you. I'm coaching you. I praise you for the efforts and the successes. And it's just really built step by step so that it's not overwhelming. So it feels really doable and manageable.
So one of the things that we're all about on this podcast is reducing shame. And so there may be a parent out there that feels overwhelmed and feels like, oh my gosh, I'm failing my child and now I'm at a level where I need professional help. What would you say to that parent?
First of all, I really respect the parents that reach out and kind of bust through that shame barrier, because the parents that I work with, like I said, they often have another child that their parenting worked fine for. They've often tried things that so many people have said to try with this child, and it's just not working. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that you failed. That you're reaching out at such a crucial time shows me that you really love your child and that you're ready to do what it takes to help turn this situation around, which I find wise and insightful and courageous.
Absolutely. We know that it's a lot easier to intervene early than it is to wait until later. And that's really true of any mental health difficulty. If you've been struggling for a long time, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get help. You still can get help. But anytime that we can say, hey, I've hit a speed bump in the road of life and I've tried my non-professional avenues and I can't seem to work through that. Maybe it's time to look into professional counseling.
The fact that you're even considering it takes courage. I know that there can be different messages in different communities about seeking mental health care being a problem. I find that often after graduating from PCIT, parents are just really proud of being such a key part of the process. Like they weren't the problem, but by having these professional therapy skills, they've really been such a big part of the solution. Like I'm not training people how to be the average parents. I'm training you with these expert skills to intervene with anxiety and with behavior problems. And I find that it really builds parents' confidence, and they can sometimes also be insightful in their own circles then as well, and somebody that other people look up to.
I love that. So I know that in our society, sometimes we really normalize behavioral challenges at certain ages. And we say things like, oh, they're just going through the terrible 2s or the terrible 3s. And it's normal for young children to throw tantrums sometimes. How do we know if it's a normal behavior or if it's something where maybe we should seek professional help for?
Excellent question. And so it is normal for young children learning about limits and regulating their behavior. For example, up to 2.5, those temper tantrums are a normal part of development. Where we start to get concerned is if after 2.5, they're not going down in frequency, or they may be going up in frequency and duration and intensity. If there's concerns at preschool and daycares about aggressive and defiant behaviors, is kind of like a red flag. That is a sign that help could be really beneficial at this point. Is if you see what's called the coercion cycle. I tend to like actually the term the escalation cycle, where say a parent sets a limit or it gives a command for a child to do something, and the child then says, no, I'm not going to, or you can't make me, or it starts to escalate, and then the parent escalates with a threat, and then the kid gets more angry, and then it sometimes ends up in some type of aggressive interaction, or the parent giving in just because this is so exhausting and I'm not going to deal with it right now. So if that kind of escalation is becoming a normal part of everyday life, that's a really great sign that PCIT could be a really good tool to come in and turn that dynamic around before it becomes more ingrained.
And kids don't want to be in that cycle, and parents don't want to be in that cycle. So both people end up losing, because I think the child, even though they may get what they want in the short term, they're not getting what they need in the long term.
It doesn't feel good to anybody, but it's a cycle that is really easy to get caught up in, especially if there's really high levels of stress, or if there's just certain child personality characteristics, or even developmental delays or challenging conditions like ADHD that just lead to a lot of impulsivity and hyperactivity. PCIT can give parents, whether there's like a underlying biological issue that's made their child more challenging to parent or not, it really gives the parents the tools to turn things around and to really be proud of their children's cooperation and minding and listening.
Great.
For anxiety, you're asking about how to know if you should seek out help. Like some childhood fears are normal, and they don't necessarily interfere with the child's life. So they're not impacting their ability to make friends. They're not impacting their ability to be dropped off at daycare. Oftentimes, one of the most common early childhood anxiety disorders that I see is when a child's afraid of separating from a parent. And that can be really stressful for both the child and parent, because the parent needs to get to work and the child needs to let go of their leg and be dropped off at daycare. And so if the child's anxiety is impacting their ability to sleep, or they're having lots of tummy aches and headaches and just not being able to do what you and the child need to do throughout the day, that would be a sign that it'd be a good time to reach out for some professional support.
I think that's great advice. There's a difference between a child saying, hey, I'm afraid of the dark, but then they're still willing to go sleep in their bed, versus a child that says, I'm so afraid of the dark that they refuse to sleep without a light on or refuse to sleep in their own bed.
Absolutely. And I haven't talked so much about the PCIT Calm, but it is also very gradual. We're not going to ask the child to face their biggest fear on day one. We're going to increase their level of security, increase their self-confidence, and then we're going to slowly start engaging in situations that previously caused anxiety and teach them to be proud of themselves for being brave. And it's really a sense of accomplishment that the child has at the end. It's not like a big, terrifying experience.
And you and I both know from working with a variety of people that gradual behavior changes are often the best, that
Absolutely.
We're going to see more lasting impact that way. Well, Anika, this information that you've shared about PCIT, I know is going to be super helpful for our listeners. And I wanted to just briefly kind of ask you a little bit about, just so people can understand where you're coming from, like how you identify spiritually.
Sure. Some of my values are just in valuing humanity and our connectedness. And I'm a firm believer in loving our neighbor and really speaking up for the cause of the oppressed and caring about those who are less fortunate than us. Times where I feel the most spiritual or connected are when I'm outdoors on a hike and I see like the sun filtering through a canopy of beautiful old trees. I really feel most alive and connected outdoors and surrounded by the beauty of nature all around.
I see a variety of Christians in my practice, but we may be coming from different denominational backgrounds or express our Christianity or live that out in different ways. And so I really want people to know that there are times where they can seek professional help from someone that may be outside of their faith, and that person will still be respectful of their faith boundaries based on professional ethics and so forth.
I really value people's faith as part of their identity. And I've worked with a lot of different people, and in my family, there's a range of faith and beliefs myself. And it's all across the spectrum. Like, I see people whose faith and whose Christianity is such a source of strength and resilience and community and connection and inspiration to do what is right and just and standing for the cause of the oppressed, and just such an inspiration. I've also worked with and know people who have found religion to be a source of trauma and pain, and they have not had healthy experiences in their churches or communities. And so really, I want to be able to work effectively no matter who walks in my door. I care about the health and well-being of their child, and the tools that I have are very applicable to two diverse cultures and two diverse faiths. I'm not going to change someone's faith when they walk in the door. I'm going to see, like, okay, so what do you believe? What values are important to you? And then how does PCIT work with those values and work with in your worldview?
Right. And I think the basic components don't go against biblical principles. Essentially, you're working with investing and having healthy, positive relationships with your children. Having
Absolutely.
Discipline and limits is definitely a biblical principle. So
Absolutely. I believe the word discipline actually comes from the word disciple. And so the goal of discipline is to teach, it's not to punish. And that's really one of the things that we equip families to do in PCIT. Oftentimes the escalation cycle can lead to a lot of punishment, but it doesn't stop the escalation cycle from happening the next day or the next day or the next day. Oftentimes punishment can seem like it works in the moment, but for certain personalities and certain children, it can actually increase the frequency of the escalation cycle. Whereas discipline is an important part of the Christian faith. We teach clear limit setting, following through. It helps your children trust what you say, to respect what you say, and to mind and listen to the limits that are set. And I've seen Christian families really benefit from the PCIT process.
I like that because I think it also supports this value of communication with your children where you're not disciplining out of anger and you're not allowing yourself to be ruled by that anger, which I believe is also biblical.
It also really values love and not provoking your children to anger. And I think it really can fit well within a Christian worldview.
Awesome. And so that's one thing that I want all our listeners to hear is that even though there are a variety of therapeutic techniques out there, and many of them are not in opposition to what we actually believe. And so we don't need to be afraid when we're seeking help for ourselves or our children that somehow we're going to be given advice to be turned away from Christianity, or we're going to be misled or misdirected in some way, shape, or form. If that does happen, then that person is probably not acting in a truly ethical manner.
As therapists, we're trained to be able to provide helpful skills that have been found to be effective for other people struggling with the same situations, but to be able to share them with people who may be from different backgrounds than we are. It would be unethical of me to try and force my beliefs or my spirituality on a family that I were to be working with.
I appreciate us being able to dialogue about that piece because I think it's important for our listeners to it drops some of the mystery of what actually happens in counseling a little bit in a professional sense. So maybe reduces some stigma and shame there as well. So.
Absolutely. And I also welcome families to let me know if there are elements of their faith or their belief system that they want to incorporate in our work together.
That's good. That's really good. So one of the things that, since this podcast is called Hope for Anxiety and OCD, I love to ask our guests at the end of every podcast to share a story of hope. So this is a time in which you received hope from God or another person.
Sure. So one of the most challenging times of my life was when I was pregnant with my child, and I had a condition. It started 5 weeks before my child was born, and my body broke out in hives and blisters from my rib cage all the way down to my toes. Wow. And so it was very hard to sleep. It just felt like I was constantly burning, especially my fingers and toes, because there's so many nerve endings there. It was just very hard to cope with. It's a pretty rare condition, and for the majority of the women that have it, it fades away after the baby's born. In my case, I was one of the very few that it continued after my child was born for about five more weeks. And after my child was born and it did not go away, I no longer had an end date. Up until that point, I was like, all I have to do is make it until the baby's born. All I have to do is make it until the baby's born. And then it was still there, and I had an infant to feed and take care of. And it got to the point where I couldn't even sleep. So I would be getting through the nights with ice packs on my fingers and my toes and taking 3 or 4 hot, cold showers to reduce the level of burning sensation that I was experiencing. And I think it would have been really easy to become hopeless at that time. I was not getting enough sleep, and it's already a stressful time of life. And also, it's a very idealized time. You should enjoy every moment of it. They're only going to be little ones. It could have been really easy to go down the why me, why did this have to happen to me route. And one thing that gave me hope and really helped me through that time was remembering family members who had walked with a child through open heart surgery and eventually the death of their child. Just their courage and strength walking through that time gave me hope that I could get through whatever I was experiencing.
Yeah.
It just really helped put it in perspective and remind me that people have gone through such difficult things and have come out of it as such beautiful, wonderful people. That there is another side to this, and I can get through this however long it's going to last.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story. I know that's going to impact somebody and encourage them in a positive way today as they're listening to this. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show. I just appreciate your friendship really and truly over the years. And I think that we share a lot of the same values therapeutically and just from a human connection standpoint of just wanting to love on people and provide really high quality, good counseling services to them. And we've gotten the opportunity to just see people be empowered and set free from things that they thought they would never be released from. And that's just what keeps us going every day when it gets hard. So thank you for all that you do.
Oh, yeah. I really appreciate your friendship as well. And really seeing the transformation that happens in families and seeing the changes is what keeps me going. It's what inspires me to keep doing what I do.
So everyone, that was my first time hearing about Anika's story of hope. And I was really blown away by that. And also just blown away by her courage and willingness to share that. If you're a parent, I hope that in some way you were encouraged by this episode. And if you know a parent that would benefit from hearing it, please let them know about our show and about this episode.
Hope for Anxiety and OCD is a production of By the Well Counseling. Our show is hosted by me, Carrie Bock, licensed professional counselor in Tennessee. Opinions given by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself or By the Well Counseling. Our original music is by Brandon Mangrum. Until next time, may you be comforted by God's great love for you.